So glasses, which is kind of annoying, but it's what it goes.
What is he, conspiracy theorist?
Yeah.
Did your son, John,
your husband have
in elementary school?
He
Middle school?
knows of him. I think he did have him, or like was in school with him when he first found out about it. He's like, oh boy.
Yeah, because John's a year older than my son Paul. They were,
You go there?
and we moved here when I was in 7th grade.
Oh yeah.
I said, he's going to kill us.
It's a great vibe. I like being there.
So we had my 3-year-old.
It's a little different.
He used to be so upset with some of the
Yeah.
say and did, and the way he reacted to things.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was always
He's
always
been
off to the side.
A nudge, like,
a really different version of everybody else's.
curmudgeonly in many ways.
The leather papers piled up like that.
I was actually surprised when
I've got a lot of jobs in my life, and this is by far just a different thing. Which is good. But still.
But you've been on for how many years?
Since it started, so however many years that is.
Since 2016.
Is that when it started?
Yeah. That's when you all
So
voted
6
on it.
years.
Yeah. No, it's
2016 to 2022 is 6.
Yeah. It's also not super exciting all the time.
We must have come out at the same
time. Victoria, you don't know.
I came on the first year.
Maybe I came on the second year. But then we wouldn't be running at the same time.
Nothing for the job, but
You went on the first board. I was the only new board member on the first board.
you have to reinvent stuff. You do your own thing.
Oh, you know what?
Like,
Yeah. I'm surprised. I thought for sure.
yeah, you do research, which I do. But some people do not. I don't know how they.
All I know is this is my 6th year.
If I can have everybody's attention. It's just about 5:30, so we've got enough. So I think I'll call, or I will call this meeting of the ACSD board.
Recording in progress.
I will call this meeting of the ACSD board to order. Today, Monday, December 5th. Work in Mary Hilton Schools. Happy to be here. Let's start with introductions. Well, we start with you, Susan.
Steve, where was that?
Barbara Wilson. Victoria Jetty.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent. Jamie McCallum.
Jen New Cedar.
Mary Gill.
Bill Hatch, Technology Director.
And why don't we have administrators?
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Heather Crowley, Executive Assistant.
Matthew Renty, Director of Finance and Operations.
Mike Dudek, Principal of MUPS.
Gracie Harrington, Principal of Urban. Jen Kravitz, Principal of Ryan Hogan.
Matthew Rankin, Principal of Airport. We scattered ourselves.
McGill Whittle, Principal of MUPS.
Katie Johnson, Principal of Shore.
Christina Johnson, Principal of Woodbridge.
Steve McKinney, Principal of Mary Hilton. Justin Campbell, High School Principal.
Is that everybody? Anyways, the class are all yours.
Yeah, just list that.
Okay, as always, we'll open it up to public comment. If you're here for public comment, please raise your hand. I see you for public comment, but if you do, raise your hand. We'll start posting. I think you're gonna make a public comment, you can just state the name.
Erica Castle, I live in Weybridge. I just wanted to follow on a comment / topic from last time. that was around Peter. You mentioned that most people are enjoying the full Thanksgiving week off, and I believe it was Lindsay raised that, maybe that's true for a lot of people, but not for her. I just want to reiterate that I've talked to a lot of community members, and it also is a challenging week, and I understand and support teachers, administrators having that time off, and support that being important, but it does really highlight the lack of childcare options that we have, especially working families, 2 parents. There's not really any options. We're left scrambling. Our kids are left feeling jerked around a lot during those holiday weeks, and so and after school too. So I would just like to comment in support of what she was saying in the lesson. Thank you.
Anyone else here for? Okay, yeah, you can comment on that. I absolutely share your concern. One thing to note though is that teachers this year had those days off, but in previous years have used them as professional development days. So even teachers, like now they're getting the time off, but they didn't in past years. And it's a hardship for teachers' families too, because quite often they have to find care for those days of professional development as well. So it's a real problem. And Vermont is a whole thing.
Laura Hartman. Anyone else? We'll hand it over. Great. We're going to use that.
All right, 4th graders, I'll meet you over there by the exit sign.
Become ACSD school board. We are very excited to have you here for the first time in a long time at Mary Hogan. Right before break, we led the Mary Hogan all-school meeting. We have all-school meetings each month that are run by students, and we wanted to share some of what this looks like. During how we organize ourselves unit, we learned all about different types of government, and we took a really close look at the United States government. In this unit, we focused on main thinkers. We talked and debated different problems in a super long 5-paragraph persuasive essays. Here are myself, Kaisa, Phoebe, Ian, and Michelle to tell you some of their persuasive essay ideas. My essay was about how we should have an animal hospital in Riverburgh.
My essay was about how everyone should read the book series Warriors. My essay was about healthy food being cheaper than junk food.
My essay idea was about how we should have coding in school.
My essay was about how animals should be free to adopt from animal shelters.
We wonder how you've been thinkers for the last month and will be this month. Have a fantastic Monday evening.
Today's reading is going to be a fist bump high five. Ashley and Phoebe are going to show us how to do it. Everyone pay close attention to see how they do it. They do a fist bump high five, then they high five like a little handshake. Vivian, what did you notice when you watched us? I noticed you gently bump their fists together. You quietly said good morning and stayed in control. Now you try with your neighbor on each side.
All right, so this is how we start all of our all-school meetings. We start with a welcome, and then we start with a greeting. We always also do the next part, so I'm going to invite Bianca and Lenny to come on over. And we're going to need Will your help with this one once they're done talking.
Each month at our assemblies, we sing the Vermont State song, These Green Mountains, and the Bruno Mars song, Count on Me. We wanted to sing These Green Mountains with you. If you don't know the words, don't worry, they'll be on the screen.
I would like to share we have a group that wants to share a little bit from our all-school read from last month.
Our class read this book, Teresa's Big Voice, and we would like to share our thoughts on it. But first, a fun fact. Did you know that it was written by Therese herself?
We were talking about the main idea, but we couldn't come up with one. So here are there were so many big ideas in this book. So we would like to share a few. First, well, people doubted her, but she didn't say, hey, you're right, and just give up. She said, well, actually, she said nothing. She just ignored them. This is an important skill. Even though it might be hard sometimes, you have to believe in yourself. If Therese can, so can you. Second, she listened to everyone. The sick, the poor, the elderly, she listened to all. She listened to their concerns, their arguments. My point is, when you listen to others, they listen to you. This is very important, because if others don't listen, you'll never be heard. And if you are not heard, no one will ever know what you are running for. Second, Therese was inspired by her mom in the army. She thought that, wow, my mom serves and helps all these other people. And in exchange, she asks for nothing. I want to be like her, and she was. Therese never asked for money or bribes after she helped someone. She did it for free. Therese was good at helping others, and she did this her whole life.
Therese was working with the Native American tribes, but she noticed that everyone was white, but that didn't discourage her. She thought that she would change that, and she did. One way she did this was by walking around and asking people to vote for her to be in a higher position of work.
Therese is a brave and kind person. She has done so many things and is still doing more. We hope this book and Therese has inspired you like it inspired us. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Now we have a bit of a poem for you. All right, ready? I need the M here. And I need Anya on that side. A and R. Ian, you're here. And you, the line is six. Okay, and I need the H and O. And the G, H. Who's the H? One is the H. H, O, G, A, N. Where's the A? A is the N. Harvey. Come on up. Okay.
An acrostic poem is a poem where the title spells out the first letter of each word. This is an acrostic poem about our gratitude and focus on the areas of Mary Hope. Seamus is going to introduce people. Hi, I'm Seamus. This is Ian, Phoebe, Anya, Willow, and Harvey. And action. M is for needles because ours is cool. A is for a part of the school day that we enjoy. My favorite part is PE.
O is for recess because recess rules. And Y is for yummy meals that the cafeteria ladies make for us every day.
Space is for space because we need our space. H is for hawks because the hawk dances.
O is for outside time. G is for great people of Mary Hope. A is for our amazing school. N is for the nurse that helps us each day.
All right, so these are the fourth graders that all volunteered. They are some of the many who led our last all-school meeting right before vacation, and this was a kind of a reprise. You missed singing one song, but otherwise it's kind of what it was. And I think it was just an amazing tribute to these guys who are both they were all thinkers as we were kind of making adaptations for this presentation, but they're also really courageous and really took care of each other and were great communicators. So please welcome me in thanking them for coming to present to you. You can stay and see about our local government, or you can head home and be well rested tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
No, wait, Ian.
You need to speak loudly because background is difficult.
Can you not hear me?
I can, but I just make it.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the audience, we can barely hear you.
Can you barely hear me? Oh,
When you're shouting, it's
Absolutely.
Can we use the microphone?
Yeah, because they're gonna screw up that.
There's two, so we can probably share them around.
How does that work?
Is
Is it too loud? I'm gonna try not to shout into it. Okay, so we have a recommendation for the minutes and a second, and any questions or comments about this? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Chip, how about bills?
There were no bills this week and a meeting 1 week ago.
Okay, Lucas. That's good. Love that. Report of the superintendent.
All right, thank you. Sorry. All right, well, for tonight's report, we're going to talk a little bit about our tax commissioner letter. So every year on December 1st, we receive the tax commissioner's letter. This is a statute. It essentially lays out our budgetary direction for the state and gives us really important information as we're in the planning process and putting together our first draft. So to remind everybody, we are moving towards first draft on December 19th. Tonight we have our principals here who will be talking a little bit about their budgets, their schools, and helping to give a little bit better picture to the board of what the FY24 budget will be supporting in all of our schools. We do have two principals that are asking today. They're going to be coming on the 19th to present, so just so you know. We're already getting that part of here tonight. This information is really important. We're going to be talking about this letter on Wednesday when we meet with the finance committee to talk about the implications as we look at what our increases are and fine-tune things in our budget to be ready on the 19th. And to another date, which we are waiting on December 1st, this is really kind of the first, this tax commission letter is the first piece of state information we really get. The second one is December 15th, when we get our equalized pupil count, which is kind of everything for us. It tells us what kind of revenue we're going to be getting from the state. So it's our student count, equalized by weighting. So just to briefly review the tax commissioner's letter and what was contained within it, right now there's a $64 million unreserved or unallocated surplus at the state level going into FY24. If that $64 million is applied to budgets statewide, to the ed fund, the overall increase, and this is like static budgets, right? Like budget to budget, the tax rate would be 3.7% increase. If the legislature decides not to put that $64 million towards the ed fund, it would be 8.3%. The yield, I won't go into too much detail on some of these numbers. We'll be sharing this information with you again on the 19th as well. The information that's pertinent to the development of our budget, but things that are important, our average homestead tax rate is lower prior to CLA. So the expectation is that given the grandness and what's happening in the housing market, that even though the tax rate year to year goes from $1.38 to $1.31, the CLA impacts on our tax rate, that will result in a move from $1.50, which was FY '23, to $1.57 in FY '24. Okay. So remember with me? That's it. It is, that's an average, yeah. And then finally, it looks like currently, and I believe we shared this last week in our meeting, statewide budgets due to inflationary pressures largely settles new settlements with employees and other factors in I think beyond education right now. Overall statewide increases of 8 to 10% are about where budgets are currently falling from a preliminary assessment by the ACSD of Education. And the average equalized per pupil spending, this is kind of looking ahead, this is projecting based on current information, equalized pupil would be up to 20,155 with a rate of growth of 9.7%. Some of that is an increase in cost, and then we are still statewide, we're still in decline overall in terms of overall student population. I believe that's about a 1% drop in student population. So that's part of the factor when you talk about the average per pupil. The rate of growth in terms of ed spending was 8.52% before factoring in the loss of students, students. So we'll be working, I mean, this is generally good news, I think, overall. There's a surplus. The rate isn't increasing significantly. We already shared and knew coming into this budget year that given all of the factors happening to budget statewide and nationally, that we would be higher than our typical 3 to 4%. And we'll be, again, talking more about that with the Finance Committee on Wednesday and then on the 16th, 19th. We also tonight have a visitor, Tim Williams, who's here. And he's going to be presenting to give kind of a budget view of our whole budget. A part of our budget is the Career Center budget. Tim has graciously accepted an invitation to come early. He's got a few presentations later on, but he's coming early for us because this date fit in for us in terms of our sequencing. And if it's okay, I'm going to hand over the mic to Tim to share a little bit more about the budget. He's got a presentation, and I've got some handouts there.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. Hoping to share with you some information that will help your process of budgeting. And as a board, you have monumental tasks, just like our board has a monumental task, and two of your colleagues have two monumental tasks, not just one. So what I'd like to do tonight is tell you a little bit about what's going on at the Career Center, and also share with you some budgeting, preliminary budgeting information. I think Peter, I think you said you're on draft 1. At this point, we're on draft 2 already, because we know that we need to get you proper information so we can budget properly. So first I'll share with you some information. And about what's happening at the Career Center. A lot of the things are happening. The gentleman in the bottom right-hand corner is a graduate of our theater program, who was recently nominated for an Emmy Award. Those of you who are fans of The Office, like my daughter is, knows every line from every episode, knows exactly who that is. This gentleman was a regular in the last season of The Office as well. So the accomplished actor, and that described here. We also are collaborating with the Homes First Vermont organization to build them a tiny house that they will use in a tiny house village that they're trying to promote to help with the housing situation in Vermont. They're trying to find some space in Middlebury, and meanwhile, we're building them a house that's literally on the trailer The picture you see here is a picture of the tiny house being started in our building. And this is right before it had to be moved into the bus garage, because once the roof trusses go on, it wouldn't be able to get out of the building. So the garage door to the bus garage is much higher. So we're using the bus garage to complete the project. Also, just a picture of some pre-tech students who are building trebuchets to hurl objects, pumpkins mostly, for like to use, for distance, and then they modify the trebuchets and try to perfect and increase the distance of the hurling those objects. We also have a very strong FFA component in collaboration with you guys, and they went to Indianapolis recently and did really well. In fact, one of the students, remember there's 70,000 FFA people, students at the convention. And there's still another right here. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about the college prep institution that Hannaford has become. It might surprise many people. In fact, the data surprised me when I first saw it. That we do send a lot of students to college. Back in 2016, 63% of Hannaford students went off to college. And you can see the blue line is Hannaford Career Center's path, and the green line is CTE centers across the state. You can see that Hannaford has always outpaced CTE centers in Vermont as a whole. And on average, we send about 50% of our students to post-secondary education, whether that's a trade school or four-year college, or what have you. Now, as far as the programs we offer at Hannaford, this is a listing of careers that are projected to increase over from 2020 to 2030. The blue line represents Vermont, the red line represents the United States. So you can see, for example, the first one is food prep and serving-related industry. You can see in Vermont it's projected to grow significantly as opposed to across the United States. And if you look at that listing of programs, you can see that we have quite a number highlighted in yellow that are directly related to programs we offer. So if you look at the top four highest growth industries in Vermont have programs that are directly related to, Hannaford has programs that are directly related to those four items. And the other yellow highlighted ones as well. And the ones that aren't highlighted, we have students who end up going to post-secondary schools and end up going into those fields. We just don't have a program that directly relates to those fields. So that's the positive side of the career center. And this is the Vermont Department of Labor Statistics. Now, the Hannaford Career Center does have some challenges. You're facing fiscal challenges, budgetary challenges, just like we are. And I'll talk about some of the unique challenges we're facing as a career center. But also, I'm going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive local needs assessment, which is, some would say, the bane of our existence, but some would say the guidebook that we use to improve. And that's the strategy we're taking, is the guidebook to improve. And what's coming out through that process is we have had high staff turnover. We have some areas that need to be rejuvenated, and we have enrollment that's not where it should be. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But also, we're identified as needing to improve our non-traditional student enrollment. So, for example, that might mean more female students in auto tech and diesel, or maybe more male students in health services programs. So it's a two-way street. We need to improve our gender balance in all of our programs. And that's not unique to us, that's common across all CTE. Now, as far as enrollment is concerned, here's the trend line for enrollment since 2014. Now, I have the October numbers here in each school year and the March numbers. So those are the two big ones that go into the calculation for CTE enrollment. You can see that, it's up, down, up, down, up, down, and so on. Mostly because in the second semester, we don't often have the same number of students we had in the first semester. Okay, aside the second semester, things are something different, so they're not with us. So it's common for our enrollment to be down in the spring semester. And I'd like to point out to you 2019, October 2019 to March 2021. There's a break in trend. It's down, 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 instead of up, down, you see a decline. And you can think about history of what happened during the time period, you get an idea what maybe it was. I also want to point out in the yellow shaded area that's on the screen now, during part of that downward trend, that's the data that was used to produce the comprehensive local needs assessment. So that data was produced and given to us by KOE when we were at our worst as far as enrollment is concerned. You notice that when the yellow stops, you notice enrollment is trending back upward, and that's a positive sign. So we are heading in the right direction with enrollment, and the trend line is not level. It goes up slightly to the right, so you can see the great trend. So that's a good sign. We also are unofficially projecting 136.68 FTEs for the coming year, which is not too shabby. So as far as enrollment is concerned, the yellow row is current enrollment by partner school. So you can see Millbury has 44.8 FTE. Now, FTE, forgive me if you already know what this means, but there's probably someone in this room that doesn't know what FTE stands for. FTE stands for full-time equivalent student. So in other words, again, if we have a student for half the time, that counts as 0.5. Even though it's one human being, counts for our purposes as 0.5. So that's why you see fractions. So we have, as of October, we had 148.8 FTEs, which is one of our highest numbers. You can also see that high for each partner school and the average and the low for each partner school. So you can see Middlebury, the highest we've ever had here with Hannaford is 76.67 FTEs. The lowest was 38, the average is 52. 44.8 is a little bit below the average, between the average and the low. So all that stuff I just talked about goes into building the budget. We have challenges, we have the enrollment, that feeds into the budget, and the budget then creates the FTE tuition. That's in a nutshell how it unfolds. So here's what we have in draft 2 of our current budget season. Last year, fiscal year 23, the year we're currently in, it was a $4.1 million budget. And what we have right now at this moment in time is a $4.8 million budget projection. There's a difference of almost $700,000, which is a 17% increase. Now, when I first saw that, I couldn't believe it. But then when we look at the numbers, there's a very logical explanation. And that the big chunk is debt service. The bond that was raised for the current renovations to take care of end-of-life, BOS end-of-life mechanicals, asbestos removal, the $8.1 million bond is generating $682,000 in the common budget. So our debt service for the common budget is $682,000 on top of the $120,000 we have. This debt is going to be retired in 4 years, so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So that represents a 568% increase for debt service from the proposed budget and the current budget. Now, that bond issue of $8.1 million was without referendum. 75% of the people voted yes on that referendum. And the consequence of that is we have $682,000 in new debt we have to factor in the budget. We also have some other increases. Health insurance costs are going to go up roughly 6.91%. Now that's not bad considering that the premium increase is 12.5%. How do we get there? Well, we get there by increasing the number of staff FTEs. we have some vacant positions that we're reworking and some we're eliminating to allow us to compensate somewhat for the debt service increase. We also have some dental insurance increase of 19%. Now, when it comes to salaries, contracted salary increases and we have a retirement, and when we deduct out the savings we're going to realize by modifying our structure and eliminating positions, we're actually going to have a budget that's going to have $3,000 less in salaries than the current year budget. So that's actually down 0.13%. So it's not a lot, but it's better than getting an increase. And here's a pie chart that shows you the percent of the various basic categories in the budget. As with any school budget, 70 to 75% is usually salaries and benefits. Okay, now look, I want you to notice the debt service pie, 16.7%. And when I compare it to the current year budget, debt service is 2.9%. So I'll just toggle back and forth between those two for a few minutes, a few seconds, so that you can see the differences. In the draft budget right now, salaries are 50%. In the current year budget, salaries are 58%. Debt service is much smaller. Benefits are 20% in the current budget, and 18% in the proposed budget. So we realized some savings in some places, but obviously we have a decrease in expenses. So how does that all factor in? Well, when we try to calculate the estimated FTE costs, tuition for FTE, and I have two columns there. The gray column is what it would have been if we did not have the bond that we had to contend with, and what it is with the bond. So if we did not have the bond payment, our estimated tuition FTE was $12,507. With the bond payment, it's $16,684. And you can see, factor down there at the bottom, you can see that if you didn't have the bond payment, we're actually looking at a reduction in the estimated tuition FTE. With the bond, we're looking at 14.3%. So let's see how that translates into factoring the money from the state. So we take the estimated local assessment, and the two columns again. One is for without the debt service, and one with the new debt service. And you factor in the tuition from the state. You get a total technical center tuition rate of $23,382. We did not have the debt service in $27,560 with debt service. So we might as well just focus on the right column now to give you an idea of where we are at this moment in time. We're looking at about 13% increase in tuition for Christmas. If we didn't have the debt service, we'd be looking at a negative 4%. So we have more budget revisions to come. We're not done yet. We have some strategies that we're going to use. For example, mentioned debt service. We have 4 years of debt service left in the old bond. We have some reserves. To me, that's a very, very wise use of reserves, to use it to fund something that has an end of life. You don't want to use your reserves to pay electric bill, for example, but it might be wise to use your reserves to pay 4 years remaining on the bond. So we're going to pay that off. That's what we're looking to do. We have a couple of other things. We're looking at restructuring, and we have a couple of other cuts we're pretty sure we're going to be able to pay. So the numbers that I put out there are the absolute worst case scenario. I don't think we're going to be there when we're done with the budget. That's where we are at this moment in time. And that's why I begged Peter to put this presentation on, because I got to give you what we have at the moment. And the moment is not great. I'll be the first to tell you that. But we're working hard to getting this stuff in. And the other important thing to remember is that higher enrollment lowers tuition. So the more our 6-semester average goes up, the less money per student is going to cost. Okay? So increasing enrollment is a good sign for the future of what's coming up. just more than happy to take any feedback or questions or whatever.
I have a question. Has there been any discussion at the state level about, I assume that other career centers are in the same situation, looking at pandemic-related enrollment declines? Is there any discussion about shifting this or including different semesters in those 6?
Not to my knowledge, there's no discussion about changing how the numbers calculated, other than there's discussions about changing the way CTEs are funded wholesale. In our opinion, would be a really good thing, because we don't like the way it's structured right now, where we have to come to you and say, hey, we're going to take X number of dollars from your budget to pay for the services that we're put on. We prefer that the state figure out a different way on CTE. But there has been no, that I'm aware of, no conversation about how the 6 semester average might be changed. There could be discussion, but I'm just not aware.
Thank you. It was really clear. It was nice. And it sounds to kind of hear a little bit about what's going on as well as, what it's that we have to talk about. In the past, when we put this data kind of far along in this cycle, we were sort of given an estimate of how much of the portion that we would have to pay in our district. It's typically a bit higher than the other districts or schools because we typically had more students. So do you have an estimate for that part? But or is that something that comes later on down the road?
Are you referring to those types of numbers up there?
That's the enrollment, but I'm saying sort of like what's sort of the tuition for the middle grade, or how much are you expecting for middle grade, or middle grade in high school, like our portion of pay to.
Yeah, it's of the 10,000 of the 16,000.
Is it just that,
That's the part that comes, one the full through and then one goes from.
So 65 times the whatever FTEs that you're estimating?
Do you have that number? Do you have the number for this center? Have they given you the number?
I don't know if I have something that's current.
Okay. Pull out.
Yeah. It's anticipating, even though the overall budget is up for other districts, because there are institutions in the past, we don't have our budgeting not actually this scary as it looking like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right, in the past, I think it's 60 pieces going in, now we have 48.
Yeah, so like we
We
can't,
might not feel it.
yeah, so like we paid 50% of it in the past, you remember before we paid another 0.5%, and it's split out in another previous split, with us for a lot lower than that previous split.
Can you all hear us in the back? Okay.
It is a little bit hard to hear. If you could use the second microphone that would pass the room. He has all, I have the others, so maybe as the board members questions we can hear.
I just have one comment, I think it was a couple of years ago, where we didn't get the correct data early on, and it did sort of convolute our discussions of the budget late in the process. These numbers are not in our control, they're in your control and the state's control, and obviously the only way that we can control them as a district, us or Chancellor or whoever, is to recruit more kids to come in and take classes in the center. So I just point that out. You weren't here then, obviously, but it wasn't awkward to get that sort of misinformation and data late in our process and suddenly having a huge, relatively huge number that we had to compensate for and explain. So thank you for presenting this very clear. I understand it's all complicated in whatever it is, but it's still important that we're on the same track here and that we don't get lost.
Your point is well taken. Peter shared that information with me prior to that happened in the past. And we don't want that to
thank you so much for this. It's very clear, yet I still am missing something. What is the mechanism by which you change the salary and benefits portion of the pie? Exactly. What changed from the 2022 to 23, the adopted ones to the draft one? Exactly.
Right, the current year budget has a much smaller debt service.
Yeah.
So,
That's it?
yeah, that's basic, that, and we actually gonna have fewer staff FTEs in the coming year.
Yeah, fewer people.
Fewer people.
Okay.
But the debt service is a much bigger factor.
Bigger factor. Okay. And so if you did attract more students, which is the goal, would you then have to hire more staff?
We have capacity to add students.
You have capacity.
Staff, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. I guess I have a question about you had a slide there about the labor, the increases in labor. And so I guess I'm curious about the healthcare one. I know just from my connection with Porter Hospital that there's been more to train folks through career centers to get them ready to hop into vacancies at Porter. And I'm just curious, is that collaboration, is there any money coming from you down in the state healthcare on that? I don't think it's just sort of.
No, there's no revenue source other than adult ed, but that adult ed certification itself.
Okay.
So Porter would be paying for people to be trained, and that money pays for the services they provide.
Okay.
I wish it was.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. It's my pleasure.
I look forward to seeing you back.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are absolutely delighted to have principals here tonight to share about their schools and what the budget supports in their schools. As a reminder, in terms of our process, Matt and I have been working on this budget and we're working with principals to learn more about their staff needs, what's happening, make sure we have all the correct information. So that has been the past probably month and a half or so that we've been working up to the point we're at right now. And with that, I'm going to ask that elementary principals can start in whatever order they would like.
I'll go first because it's custom.
And if you want to maybe just come up to a kind of word,
Can I have both my?
or would you like to stand?
Good evening, everyone. There's a lot of pressure on me because I go first and everybody else knows the great bunch of favor. So it's awkward for me to be here with other principals. The length of the presentation should probably adjust to how complicated it is. So my presentation is going to be very, very short. Bridgeport has about 50 students this year. We anticipate having about 50 students next year. We have 15 kids in our pre-K. We anticipate being close to full or full, which is 16 next year. Because you were in Bridgeport a few months ago, you know what we're working on, which is what we're all working on. We're working on building community, and we're working on improving literacy across the board for all students. My teachers continue to work on that. That's our focus. And what we're excited about is to have stability and consistency so we can continue that work. That's really as simple as it is. Less than 3 minutes. And Heather's not here. So
all right, well, welcome again. If I think about the Mary Hogan School for next year, we have currently 374 students this year. The 6th grade class is one of our larger classes, but the incoming kindergarten is projected to be large also. So I would assume that we'll have pretty rough stability in terms of numbers. We have 24 sections, pre-K through 5th grade. Again, like I would assume that we're gonna keep that same number of sections for next year. And we typically engage in a process once the budget passes in terms of figuring out what class sections are where. It's a collaborative work session with the faculty. We use the same process for 3 years. We tweak it every year with faculty input, but we'll probably continue in the same way. But it is important to let the budget pass before we determine sections, in case we need to change course. And I think that, the work that started this past summer with faculty and staff was really around thinking about what are our traditions that now that we're in a more endemic pandemic, that we can get back to. And so looking back at what are the traditions that we're reviving, and then also what are the new traditions that we can listen to students and use faculty and bring in. And so I assume that is work that will continue next year, as well as some pretty significant faculty and staff voice in leading the school and distributed leadership. And then we'll also be kind of coming to you for mutual approvals for some additional things. That's the traction. Okay, next. Hello. I don't have a lot to say, but it is exciting to be part of the budget discussion for next year as Richmond Elementary. And so I think that in itself is a major milestone. We're looking at staying the course. And right now we have 3 classrooms, multi-age, K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, which is new this year. And that's been an adjustment, but it's going well, and we anticipate maintaining that configuration for next year. So 3 classroom teachers, roughly 45 students, and we'll have a pretty big 5th grade. We think there's 9, and not too sure about our numbers for K, but it actually was pretty small, so we're hoping maybe some tuition students and others that we don't know about right now. Otherwise, we're also, like Jen said, excited to be getting back to some of the things we were doing before the pandemic. We'll be skiing and having our residents and continuing with multi-age activities that we always enjoy. And it's a small but mighty group, as maybe you've read in the paper. We're all pulling together and doing everything that needs to get done, with some shortages here and there, but it's a committed group of people, as you know, and we're excited to be playing for next year.
So Weybridge is also staying the course. We have 44 students this year and anticipate having the same number next year. We will have 3 classrooms, combined classrooms, which we've had since way before my time. Dearly beloved and pedagogically incredibly sound. K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fairly evenly balanced in terms of numbers. We will be maintaining the same level of staff throughout, so our budget is really just to increase the salary and inflation, et cetera. That's basically where it is. We will continue our K-5 inquiry into engineering. We're pretty much involved in that all the time. The staff focus this year is on developing vocabulary for students for many different reasons, and using that as an inquiry base, and also really looking into our inquiry practice. So every teacher is trying to teach a subject area, such as handwriting, through an inquiry process rather than a direct explanatory conversation. So that's it. Thank you.
Hi, Andy Johnson from Elementary. So Shore Elementary is working at coming together with all stakeholders. The Thursday before Thanksgiving, we had a wonderful luncheon where we had over 70 families, grandparents, aunts, uncles come in to join students in the gym at long tables and have a meal together. And it was really spoke to the culture and community of Shoreham, where there's great support from the families, staff who were involved, and this couldn't have happened without staff that care and put in the time to connect with families. And the staff just want to collaborate to improve student learning, and that is what we're focused on, is coming together to strengthen the learning at Shoreham. And we have 77 students this year at Shoreham, and we anticipate the numbers to be similar next year, and we'll continue that staffing to offer robust support for all the students so we can continue our good work.
Okay. I'll wait for Michaela. Come on over. So you have the two of us here. Michaela Wizzle and myself are co-principals this year. Hopefully, we can get this down for minutes. So again, I think our goal and our hope is that when our students come home and our staff go home to their families, we're talking about all the good things that are happening at moms and their experience and so on. So when we think about our vision and our goals, we're committed to supporting all learners. This year, we had an opportunity to shift our leadership team and structure, which allowed us to really reflect on how do we best support our community, our students, our school, and thinking about how we foster positive school culture. That's been our true goal this year. We're continuing to spend a lot of time understanding moms. As you know, we have transitioned with moms in the last couple of years to thinking about where we were, where we are, where we're going, and we're continuing to do that. On a side note, this summer, when Kim and I got together as a formal leadership team, we had a lot of time to spend collaborating and thinking about what that vision would be. And we had a significant amount of staff that came together in the summer to talk about that as well in terms of some of the initiatives and goals that we had. So we had a lot of time to be able to process that. We continue to process that as a team, and Michaela's going to share a few of those goals that we have.
Good evening, everybody. We have two goals that we're kind of thinking about this year and also thinking about the importance of next year. And so one of them is around relationships with students and caregivers. And we feel really fortunate to be carrying over our leadership model that we have this year for next year and maintaining our dean and climate and culture who's been able to do some work with clubs and teams, but also help us think about how we support students in a systemic way so that it's durable over time. And additionally, our leadership structure has helped us support our pretty new teaching team that we have this year. We have phenomenal staff, and it's a lot of like I spend time with offering teachers and help them feel like and become committed and valued members of our teaching team. It also allows us to take time with students and families, which is super important as we work to shift time and culture. Our next goal is around students accessing instruction at their level and in areas of interest from teachers that they feel connected to. And this goal is really focused on both our schedule and also our teammate structure, which many of you know shifted this year from straight grade teams that we had last year with pretty large team sizes to smaller teams where teachers felt more connected to students and families and students felt more connected to teachers. And there's lots of benefits to the structure and also to our schedule this year, and we're looking forward to embarking on a journey with our teaching staff this year to think about whether or not the structure that we have right now, the schedule that we have right now is the schedule that we hope to have in the future. So we started conversations around that, and we're anticipating looking forward to staffing levels staying the way they are so that we can continue to make shifts that meet the needs of our diverse learners. As you all know, middle schoolers are really special group of students. And we spend a lot of time thinking about the difference between 6th graders and 8th graders and how we can address their individual needs, but also ensure that a school feels like a community. And Nicole's going to talk about special education and intensive needs care educators, but it's been a priority for us this year, to hire skilled paraeducators, and we've done a fantastic job with the help of the central office. And their role in our school is really invaluable and important, and we're looking forward to communicating them for this year as well. So, thanks so much.
Hi everyone, it's Justin Campbell, high school principal. I guess I'm not the favorite, but I am the last, so I don't know what that means. So on the one hand, our budget is sort of status quo. We also, like many other schools, anticipate our enrollment being relatively flat, taking up maybe 10 or so students for next year. And going into the future, we look like a school that is continuing to be 500 to maybe 550, bouncing up a little bit, up and down a little bit over time, but pretty consistent there. We had also, our staffing situation was pretty static. We have lovely staff, incredibly talented, and many of them thankfully returned. Having said all of that, there's a lot of work, a lot of really exciting work that we are tackling and that we need to do, quite honestly. So our staff, beginning last spring and then chugging along into this year, has been really doing a lot of thinking about goal setting, what we need to tackle. Sometimes in education, it feels like we're constantly bouncing between from one initiative to another, all the catchy acronyms that no one can remember. So we were hoping to really grab onto some sort of longer-term goals and priorities. So here they are. Number one, we need additional flexible pathways for our students. So I didn't know things would be talking today, but we've had some wonderful conversations, early conversations with the Hanford Career Center and looking at some of the impediments that get in the way for our students taking classes there. And some of those are imposed by us, potentially. Some of those are potentially imposed by the Career Center. Again, we're not trying to prevent students from being in the Career Center, but sometimes choices we make, because we are two organizations can get in the way. So ironing those out. And it goes beyond the Career Center. Our students, we have students for one reason or another. Some are not ready to be in a traditional classroom. Some really have interests that pull them a little bit further afield than a traditional classroom might allow. And so I think we have work to do there. We need to be building some additional options that keep our students engaged and really speak to their interests and their culture and values. We need to work on simplifying things. The job of education, you're seeing educators across the country, across our state, leave education right now. There's a lot of reasons for that, but I think the ever-building complexity of the job is one of them. So when we're looking at a learning management system, manage that. When we're looking at, there's lots of choices and there's lots of, at any given moment, there's lots of things that we're as leaders have to make decisions on. I think for me, and our staff really spoke clearly about this, we need to work towards simplifying things, making it more workable and sort of making the job of being an educator easier. And finally, others have touched on it, we have work to do with school culture and community, really maintaining that as a focus, pushing on our discipline practices, how we handle students in crisis. This is a tough time for students, for educators, so we have real work to do there. So on the one hand, sort of a status quo budget, but I didn't want to let this brief opportunity with you all go by without touching on the fact that we have a lot of work to do. And I feel lucky to be here. We have the group of people the thoughtfulness, the intensity, the dedication the staff bring to all of this blows me away all the time. So I think I'm the last one. I don't know who I should have might go to, but I assume Will Hatch.
Thank you so much. It's always so fun to be on the receiving side of their not so budget reports. It's interesting. I mean, the one thing I feel like I didn't hear from anyone, and maybe it's that everything's going so swimmingly, but I didn't hear about sort of holes that need to be filled in terms of positions, or you really wish you had XYZ person or program or thing, and that would make things work better. Does anyone have anything like that? I mean, we're reading all the time about how we can't hire enough anyone, and I know that we are still trying to hire, but nobody spoke to sort of how that's impacting and whether or not their budget is shifting because they either can't fill or they decided to no longer try filling.
Well, Justin get ready. I would say at the central office level, as we look at some of our grants and positions that we had hoped to fill, I think over the last year or so, we have done that where we've had a position we posted, we couldn't find anyone, we decided, okay, had that out there long enough, we're gonna now think about at least for response. I think as a whole, we're not giving up yet on being able to fill some positions going to the next year, but I think this is something that we'll be talking about on the 19th when we talk about our student services budget and student need, which Justin referred to kind of beautifully, that we are having to think really differently about what our students need, and we're looking at this as comprehensively and holistically as we can. Some of that does involve thinking about current staffing structures that we have in place and thinking about ways to adapt them. Our historic, we have a teacher, we have a paraprofessional, and that whole model, I think we've been forced to look at differently as we haven't been able to hire paraprofessionals, especially the one-on-one intensity of paraprofessionals. So that has forced us, I think, in a lot of powerful ways to look back, not just at the positions, not looking out there, but looking internally at our structures and how can we best support the students. So this is definitely ongoing work that we're thinking about as we're building this budget.
Sure, thanks for asking. So I'll get right to it. I think mental health supports are hugely on my mind. Our community, our students' access to outside counselors is pretty limited, right? I don't know if anyone has described the security counselor for themselves with their children, but it's really pretty limited out there. And so schools become really fill that need. So I have currently 2 CSAC clinicians at the high school. We have budgeted 2.5. We have long had 2.5, but the 0.5 is my surprise is never filled because it's a half-time position. And then we have 1 prevention specialist on staff as well, plus our school counselors. And all of those folks are, I feel badly that I'm constantly asking them to push. Now, I know you said you're limited to tests, but how about tests plus 5 or tests plus 6? That's a huge need. I think also we have students who need, one way or another, they need their world to be smaller than the typical high school class. So because of social dynamics, because of struggles they're having, a typical MUHS class with 20 students and the sort of hustle and bustle of the school is really challenging. And so we're thinking about and sort of beginning this early stages of looking at what's happening out there with some alternative educational programming. What would it look like to have for some students who have been able to have much smaller classes with that would cost staffing. Just, wherever you did that, if you wanted to do a science class like that, that would impact staffing. And then finally, and I'll give up the mic, because I could go all night, but, I think interventionist is something that's really, at high school, especially has sort of, and I'm sure Nicole will take you through all of this, it has sort of special education, where we supported some students who had some specific learning disabilities and other challenges. And then we've had regular education, not a lot in between. So we've started adding some of those positions. Caitlin's been wonderful about working with some of the grant opportunities and putting them there. But coming out of COVID, those students need a lot of support beyond potentially what's, again, we have amazing teachers, but when you have 20 students in front of you, yes, you can differentiate, but it might be really hard to find time to connect directly with Justin and really zero in on what his need is and how it's supporting. So those are a few areas that I feel well supported here, and we can do a lot of reallocation. So I don't know if it's necessarily a whole, but it's certainly things that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Principal.
So we'll segue with interventionists, but also to say we are managing quite well. So it's not as though we are talking about a gaping hole. And I think probably when you talk with support services in the future, our interventionists, which we were so happy to get last year for at 0.5, we now have another wonderful interventionist this year at 0.5, that because there are staffing issues, I believe, or lack of enough special educators, our interventionists, totally capable, totally wonderfully capable to do this, is providing almost all of our special ed services, which means we don't actually have an interventionist. And so that's a piece of really trying to figure that out. The other thing that comes up is because of changes, we now only have really one staff meeting a month, which is not enough time to do deep work. And so I would really love to see a time put into the calendar that honors school-based work, not to take away from district-based work, but to deepen that and have it be more coherent within schools, because that's a really, really important thing for schools to have in order to function really well. So those are the two things.
Anyone else?
Specifically, this board is confused with adding numbers about facility. Just in particular instance, you identify some serious physical facilities needs, and I was wondering if you could address why this is not, you talk a lot about people, but I think facilities needs to be addressed. We hear what it's like to be in that building every day, and what was the ability.
Sure. I think the most glaring need, the kitchen is underway, right? So the kitchen project is one that was making me pretty nervous when I first came. We're not there yet, but it feels good to have that plan underway. And then there's a number of other ones that I think, like Tim was talking about with their recent bond, I think many of our systems are at or near the end of life. And so we had a flood in the science, in the basement of the H wing where the science rooms are a couple of years ago. I can't remember now, was it last winter or the winter before? I think it was last winter. A heating, it's well beyond its end of life, froze, flooded 3 classrooms. So I think those sorts of things are going to continue to happen. We've got roofs that leak, etc. It's a wonderful building. I think that I feel lucky to be there, so I don't want to complain. But there are a lot of things like that that are just sort of at the end of life and need replacement. And certainly, everything from floor tiles to it's an old building. It's been well kept up, but we're sort of at that point where we need to tackle some of those again. So I think probably Bruce will talk about, certainly the roof is a high priority. it's not the jazziest project, but the paving around the building is all, I mean, it's broken, so people slipping, tripping, those sorts of things are likely to keep happening. So we do have, the things I'm talking about probably won't be part of a regular budget, I'm guessing, but they're certainly on our minds as well. Still used, but crew does a great job keeping them up and running.
Thanks, Justin. I want to just follow up on the comments, both Justin from you and from Christina regarding intervention and sort of the way that I think administrators in our school buildings have been forced to kind of, maneuver staff to cover need and then a given day. And I'm just curious, I'd like to know from you, Jen, you, Tracy, from Matthew and like, how often is that happening? I'd like to get a real sense of the impact that's having on our students with the highest need. It seems to be a prevalent problem, certainly. I think it probably is a problem with moms. And I guess I think it's important for our board to understand, while we may not have gaping holes, that if somebody's out, often it's the para, whoever has the most flexible schedule is asked to fill that gap. And my sense is that that's probably happening more often than we're aware of. And I think that's a really important consideration when we think about the configuration as a whole for the district and making sure our kids, especially those with the greatest need, are being met. So if anybody can speak to frequency of that happening, other kind of flare-ups that we should be thinking about as we move forward.
I would say that staffing the building every day, I was hoping would be easier this year, and I think it's not. It's probably more complex this year. I've just gotten a little bit better at it, maybe. I would say the average 7 to 12 people out every day. And our priority is obviously students who are in classrooms and students who have particular needs, who might have one-on-one supports or things like that. I think we built a pretty good system with some redundancies in it so that particularly, we've been pretty deliberate so that kids who have kind of the most complex needs have multiple staff who are trained to support them. There have been occasions when, it's not an ideal situation, but I'm saying most of the time it is pretty great. The staff have been amazing. I think the impact is manyfold, but the lack of consistency for kids is really, really hard. And there are nobody's trying to be out, right? There are a lot of reasons why people are out, but it's just really hard for kids. And there's not much we can do about that. I also think that there are a lot of people filling in for people in really quiet ways, like when our kitchen, who normally has 4 staff, had 1 or 2, people just showed up, and I think Tracy, they talk about that story under Tracy, and I think that it would be great to somehow be able to recognize the amount that people are giving. Of course, Stephen might cover a lot of duties most days, but we can't do all the duties. And while it seems like lunch and recess seems maybe superfluous or not in need of high staffing, it's actually a really important time because it's so unstructured. That the students who struggle the most, who maybe don't have somebody with them, really need that consistent support. And so when a kindergarten teacher every Friday has lunch with her class, regardless of staffing, she's giving up her lunch to make a decision to eat with her kids to make sure that it's consistent for them. It's a really big deal. And there's not a lot of free time in elementary schools. I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's use your time.
I really didn't want Justin to get the last word. Everything Jen said, I think is true. I think to address the particular question, last year, I took my interventionist and used my interventionist as a sub more than I would have liked. That, the stuff that I talked about at the end of last year and going into this year, and we built kind of like Jen said, like redundancies, so that I don't think there's been a day this year where that's been the whole day. There's been like fill-ins for 30 minutes, a half hour, 45 minutes. The other thing I would say though, because Jen and I are the only principals with pre-Ks, staffing pre-K with the ratios, getting enough people with that qualification and having that be absolutely positively the ratio of kids to adults cannot be broken. And factor onto that, kids with special needs who have one-on-one needs. In my school, I have 3 to 4 staff for 15 kids in pre-K, and then the rest of the school, which has a large percentage. And this is my way of saying, since I think when I started, I made a joke, and it wasn't really meant to be a joke. What is profound about what we need is consistency. That's what I need. I need enough consistency with everything that's going on in the world so that my team can work. And since I'm here with the invitation, we need a vision for pre-K. We have a lot of administrators working on pre-K and thinking about what's possible, but until we know what we're building or not building, it's a really, for lack of a better term, frustrating process. So I, as somebody who has a pre-K in my building, would like to know, are we building towards something big, or is it status quo, so that we can do that work. And when you don't know exactly where we're headed, that's challenging. Thank you. I think Justin will have one more thing.
I will just echo, I think what Matthew said about consistency. I think can vary. Varsity just done the adults that are available too. I think we have a huge debt to our substitutes. It's one of the most attractive jobs in the world, but there are some very committed and gracious substitutes. And in our case, we have a small group of dedicated folks that feels like when called, will show up. But I don't know if every building is able to have that, and I don't know what it would take to try and build that by building, because I think that would allow consistency, and it would surprise me if we ever had a day with too many staff. But if the person was filling in as a building sub or an extra pair of pants, just was already knew that's where they were going to be, then there might be more people who want to apply, and we wouldn't have the headache of calling around and seeing who would show up, and that whole process, if there's anything we can do to fix that a little bit, would be great.
Thank you so much. This has been really informative. One thing I'd like to follow up on, Justin, you talked about simplifying things for staff. And I really put that out for everyone, right? Because what I'm hearing here is the complexity for the staff. So what can we do, as a board, to really support you in that effort? Because I think with everything that's being put on people's plates, if there is some simplification, and that would be probably a good thing.
I think that what Justin spoke to in terms of like mental health concerns and behavioral concerns from kids who didn't go to preschool because it was the pandemic and didn't have dates. I think we're just going to see that for a while, and that's okay. And it's just a level that is added to teaching. That is a lot, and having the right people, not just people, but having the right people in the right places and having systems is really important. And so, like, consistency with those people, but also understanding it's super, super important. It is a thing, like Justin, that keeps me up at night.
I echo everything that my colleagues were saying in terms of mental health. Just recently walked into the nurse's office and there's a lot of kids out there. And you think oftentimes it's physical health, but it is mental health. So I think a lot of our schools are just turning into community schools where we're dealing with mental health, physical health, lack of healthcare, lack of wraparound services, and just clearly seeing that there's those gaps. So when we think about clinicians, social workers, counselors, PIs, behavioral interventions, I think those are the staff that would help support anybody, whether it's the admin team, whether it's teachers, because we are taking on many roles in that sense. So thinking about, I don't know the answer, but I think just thinking about having special roles or specialty roles when we think about moving forward in our budget to support students and their needs. Because they are great, they are unique, and we need a lot of specialists there.
I think another factor to consider that's related to staffing and subs is that what really jazzes teachers up about the work that they do is engaging in professional development that feels meaningful, even more meaningful when the job is getting more complex by the day. And we have lots of opportunities for professional development in ACSD, but I think there's a level of guilt that some folks feel around engaging in meaningful professional development because of how challenging it is to fill teaching positions when they're out. So I also don't have an answer to that. The opportunities are out there, there's great offerings, it's supported, but I think it's a little bit of leftover feeling that people have around being out because of how hard it is to fill positions.
Just a comment quickly, you know, somebody asked about what the board could do, and a lot of times we're sort of helpless in this, and there's a guilt to that. It's not that we, as people that are interested in education, don't want to fund certain positions, but constantly what we're hearing now is we can't even find even some of the most basic jobs. Just custodian right on through the whole systems. And, you know, this is obviously not just an education issue. This is a societal issue, and we have to figure out how we break it up into the ways that we have some control as a board, control or incentive or whatever. But on the other side, I just don't want to go home at night and feel guilty about that I haven't solved all the world's problems. And it is an issue, honestly, because it's how do we deal with all of these special, not only special needs in the regular way, but everybody has a special need. Whether it's they got to play athletics, or they have to be in theater, or they can't deal with a class that's bigger than 4 or 5. It seems like we've done all of this over time. I've been on the board for a long, long time. We had diversified education, we had this, where we needed 208 Charles was designated as a special place at one point. We did away with that for different reasons, I understand, but we seem to recycle a lot of this and then feel guilty that we aren't sort of accomplishing it. I know I do, I get frustrated by it. Not at anybody else, but just that being on the school board or being a teacher means you can't necessarily solve it all. And, society sort of thinks that's what we're supposed to do. That was my piece. Sorry.
I have a little bit more into this, so it might be sounds pretty strange.
thank you all for sharing with us. It was really nice to hear from you how things are going. And it gives me a lot of food for thought. There were a couple of things that I heard that really I want to think more about, learn more about, like Chip was saying, the alternative programs, these other models that students need and would benefit from. And, you know, I don't really know what's happening right now, as much as I have in the past with these non-traditional programs, but I think you should put a lot of support behind that if we have the ability to. And then talking about substitutes, it makes me wonder if we've ever considered having like a full-time benefited position as for a full-time sub or full-time benefited positions where they just float and they just go around, that sort of thing. I don't know if we consider that sort of thing. I am left wondering, and I guess I could send a couple emails about some of the, I guess, more central office budget, like the structure, how things are going there. It's great to hear from the schools, and we get a lot of information from the central office. But it would also be interesting to hear in a similar way what's happening there. Oh, fantastic, thank you. Know what's coming. I'm glad you mentioned pre-K. I wonder about that too, you know, it's status quo more or less. And at the last meeting, we talked about facilities and bonds and how we sort of like broken into tiers, or priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. And when the student representative, when asked, it was more about like the people and, you know, not, I don't know, his response was really interesting to me. And it seems like we don't have the luxury of talking about what happens in the schools every day in the same way. You know, we're not talking about, you know, a $10 million bond for priority 1, not facilities, but you know, I wish we had the luxury to talk about if we have an extra $2 million in the budget, what would we do with it, a priority 1, not ESSER, but just on a day-to-day basis. Hearing what you guys wish you had in your schools, you know, what would really transform things. And, you know, it's just be interesting to hear what would your priority 1, 2, and 3 be, and how much would it cost? And you just, I don't know what would have to change in the world to be able to think about things differently like that. And my final thought is about ratios. My son goes to Mary Hogan, and there are a lot more students in his class than in some of the smaller schools, but overall, I'm curious about ratios. That's like another email I can send, but you know, teacher-student ratios, and then total staff-student ratios. He has access to a full-time nurse and a full-time music teacher, but ultimately, he's in a classroom with over 20 kids in it, and he has been for most of his time here. And sometimes it seems like he gets lost in the shuffle. So I just really value all your input, and it gives me lots to think about and Google late night, and I can't sleep other than, you know, cats and that sort of thing. You know, people doing their hair, I can like Google some of this stuff. So it's for your time, everyone. Did anything else have their hand up?
Thank you. I've been in this district for a very long time, and for many years, I think everybody who's been a teacher for a long time knows that what comes in kindergarten and how solid they are will sort of predict where they're going to go. So many children today are in very stressful situations. Their families are in stressful situations, and we're not as a society taking care of those really young kids. As educators, we get the end, we get them. Now we got to fix all the things that we're not done getting or providing for those kids at a time. I really feel like we need to put that emphasis right at the beginning, get really solid foundations for these children and their families. The more we keep adding things on later on, we should be putting that money down at the beginning and trying to build a stronger society coming out. I work in the community doing a lot of outreach for some of the more needy families in the community. When I go to their houses, I know they don't have a chance in hell of making it to school until something happens early in their life to help those families get their lives together. So we cannot keep pushing it up. We gotta start really looking at the foundation for these kids. Prenatally, perinatally, early childhood, preschool, we need as a society to really put our emphasis there. So we can then get up and do parts of educating. Teachers are spending so much time, staff is doing so much time, trying to remediate all the social needs that we're not remediating.
Thank you all. We really appreciate all of you spending time with us here tonight, and getting your perspectives on your home schools and the district. And we hope that we can go to a budget that continues to support the great work that we're doing, and is hopefully additive also, so that we can explore new programming and so with that being said, you are free to stay, and you're also free to go. We thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I think that we can begin our discussion for the real study. Unless you have anything you want to.
I just want to whoa, sorry. That's too exciting. I also want to thank leaders for being here every day. I'm so grateful to work with all of you, and I think when I see all of you together speaking, it's even that much more impressive. So anyway, thank you for everything you do.
All right, for the board, we have on the agenda, action or discussion around the board stipend. Talked about this a little bit at the last meeting. Peter and Matt and I have discussed a little bit and, toyed with ideas around having sort of a menu of options, you know, if we increase the stipend, could we do something like, you know, here's the base, and then if you would like to, you know, opt into additional for childcare or transportation. And in the end, we decided that that was just sort of complicating matters even more. And instead that we should just ask the board, sort of, are we interested in increasing the stipend? If so, to what amount? And then sort of the logistics of it, we would work out, but it would continue to be something that people can either opt into or not opt into. And we're going to look, and that's going to look into whether or not there could be an additional option of sort of donating a stipend back to a certain program or area of the budget. So it would be sort of when you go in and do your once a year paperwork, there's sort of the option to, yes, I want a stipend, no, I don't want a stipend, I want a stipend, or I want to donate a stipend. And that would be sort of the extent of the paperwork. So I guess the question here before us tonight is, do we think that increasing the stipend one would help to defray the costs associated with being on the board, especially for people with small children? As I said in the last meeting, I don't like the idea of the cost associated to being on the board, preventing someone running for the board. And so, although I don't think we could ever, depending on each individual situation, I'm not saying that we should, sort of pay someone as much as they think that they're either losing or opportunity lost kind of thing, but, are we interested in raising it to a certain, to a higher level to sort of help, offset some costs associated to, being on the board? So with that, I'll turn it over to you all and see, does anyone have any thoughts on this?
So the thing that has struck me about this conversation is people saying how you feel really dissatisfied. And that's definitely true for those individual pieces, but if you're on board, I love you all, but these are not necessarily the people that need on board. We need different voices and higher spending to attract those different voices. So yes, we may personally not need a second and advocate you out to sort of do that. But a higher stipend might attract more diverse group to be on board without having to go through any additional paperwork or saying something like, well, we need this because of, that shouldn't be the question you should be asking. We should be there and let those people be affected to themselves. I think ours is low. I think it's low across probably the state, and we know certainly across Madison County. So I would advocate for a higher stipend, not necessarily for people here on the board, but to attract people to serve on the board that we really need here in this system.
Yeah, I think, this is a lot. I've been thinking about this as well. I think a higher stipend is good, but I'm concerned that in the end, what we could really afford for a stipend isn't really going to help that much for the folks that really need it. Because people won't be able to afford to. So one thought I had is there a way to those that have childcare costs, to be able to have so that granularity, but maybe just very simple granularity, so that, if someone's serving, they should at least be able to cover the childcare costs, right? And I'm not sure the stipend would necessarily do that, the increase. I would be concerned about that. So it's just a thought I had.
Ron? So, the Career Center, when we talked about increasing ours, it was because of several reasons. One was struggling to get, really our workforce investment people, to join the board. I mean, they're busy enough with their own work lives, but then to add on the board meeting, just wasn't working. So that was one of the reasons. Another reason was that the amount of work that we were finding that the Career Center had on its plate was increasing, and knowing that we were moving into a bond issue and having to do all the facilities work, there was more and more work that was being asked of people. The amount of meetings increased tenfold, it felt like. Still feels like that many. So we just, we looked in Madison County, we didn't go anywhere else. And after I saw them stipends that other boards have been getting, I was like, oh my goodness gracious. But we quite literally just looked at the boards in Madison County, and that was where we had our papers. But if we had not asked the voters to increase the stipends, board members previously received $50 for every full board meeting they attended. And if I think my numbers right for last year,
Number of meetings that we had were pretty much either equal the stipend amount or exceeded the stipend amount based on just full board meetings. So, and we also have members on our board that have childcare issues, and they were grateful for the additional funds, but I don't think we ever had a conversation around, paying for childcare and things like that. It's just thankful for some help to help them with those bills.
I think the basis of the stipend originally was to try to help what people were talking about, with childcare or other types of things. I mean, you can follow this argument all the way to the state legislature. My brother was a legislator for 10 years. There's no doubt he lost money in Montpelier. He's a farmer. He had to pay somebody to do what he was doing when he wasn't there. But he wanted to do it. That was the trade-off. And so to try to balance off whether how much each individual's childcare needs may be or others, or someone like myself who's retired, I think is impossible. I think it makes sense to increase it somewhat at this point, just because we are not really in the same realm as some of our other compatriots. But I think to try to individualize this type of thing just it's too difficult. And I think you can either decide to be on the school board or not. And most people don't, for many other reasons, certainly not because it might cost them money. Legislator may be a little different. I'm using that as an analogy because it is one and our same thing. But as far as school board goes, I think you either want to do it or you don't. And if you're going to do it, hopefully there's some of this money that can be used to defray some of those things which you would have to pay out of, and childcare comes up, or transportation from Ripon or Bridgeport or whatever different. But otherwise, I think we should increase it. It wouldn't be a problem with increasing it to 1,000 or in that realm. But
No, we thought we'd bring it to the board to speak. I mean, in my head, I was thinking, if we look at, boards in the district, 1,500s to, but I was going to throw it back to the board to see what.
the 1,000 I just threw off the top of my head, but and honestly, it could be anything, probably more than the 500 is there now.
Yes, I personally, I agree, we should change it, it's like, how much, so I was curious, what, Suzanne, you mentioned a lot of them are higher around here, average maybe 1,500, is that the same, Victoria? I mean, that would be tripling ours, this is a significant increase, so to Barb's point, this is something that doesn't, for people with small kids, if you do childcare, it doesn't really come close to doing it as that. So what is our goal there? I suppose I totally support the idea of making it a blanket rather than a per cost thing.
Then I would like to make a motion that we increase the board stipend to $1,500.
Second. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Questions, thoughts, comments on $1,500?
It won't be a surprise, I'm fully in support of increasing the board stipend. I be in favor of doing it with all those check boxes or without the check boxes. I think I wonder, as we look ahead at equity being such a focal point of our decision-making, how we can be forward-thinking about not only the board, who's on, board member, but who's attending the board meetings. And it just occurred to me as a part of that process, childcare keeps coming up over and over again. And I would like people to just think about, I bet more people would be able to come to our meetings if we put a little childcare a little bit higher priority. This knowing that it's so hard to find volunteers, it's hard to find staff, but for board members and for people to be more involved in our, even if they're just watching the process, what would it take to be able to offer childcare during our meetings? What would that cost? What would it take to offer, like, not a full meal, but just some snacks or something like that at our meetings as perhaps a separate discussion from the board statement itself? And I know for me as a board member, that would make a difference when I was considering whether or not to put my name in. Childcare was the deciding factor, and it's been the toughest challenge, and without virtual meetings, I probably would have had to resign. I've had to do so many meetings virtually just because Henry can be there while I'm there. So I'm grateful for virtual meetings and for all the work Bill does to make them possible and all the other people that he works with. So yes, to increasing it, can we take a step further as we think about equity and what can we do to lay out the welcome mat so that when we have a meeting at Mary Open, like we have, it was great when the kids were here, but then we have to go to bed. I think making meetings earlier might be a positive thing in that way. Because it's not, around 8 o'clock, a lot of kids turn into a switch goes off or something, You wouldn't want Henry here at 9:30, if he's telling you that much. He'd be very helpful. Really.
I'm honestly on the fence about this a little bit. I do support increasing the stipend to open the door for more folks. I think that potentially is true, and also to sort of level us up with other boards in our region. That makes sense to me. But I do think about the financial impact of that, and I know full well, not everyone will take it, or maybe not take it in the future. But it is money that we need to budget for, and everybody gets a $1,500 stipend for a 13-member board. That's $19,000 to $20,000. It's not a small amount. And so I feel kind of conflicted about that, given all the other sort of things that are budgetary pressures on our district. And, when I think about $19,000 and where else that could be applied, so I'm honestly truly conflicted about this. And it feels awkward to talk about, all of our financial challenges and then also say, but let's go ahead and do this. So I really struggle with this. I guess, I think at our prior meeting, or one of our prior meetings, we talked about the rundown of others, and it was between 1,000 and 1,500, or 1,200 and 1,500. I'm just wondering how that compares in terms of size of the board, and maybe because there's 13 members that this work is divided amongst, whereas some boards have less than. I've just been wondering whether that's been.
Yes, Suzanne, do you remember, do you remember from your Hannaford discussions what the other boards in the district?
Okay, so, it's like about 1,200, it looks like, it's pretty,
But you're right, some of those boards are only 7 people.
Right, so I guess I just want us to be thinking about that, and to Janie's point about increasing in threefold, feels like a big jump. And thinking about the timing of that big jump. So, I really am having a hard time with 1,500. I would advocate for lowering it a bit. But that's just me, and because I'm always thinking about and talking about our bottom line and where we're investing that money, so that's where I don't know.
So would it make sense to estimate what it would take to just offer childcare and maybe, food? Would that, instead of raising, would that at least we'd have childcare? It might be, I don't know. Okay.
I'm super conflicted about that because I feel like that's the best choice for children, frankly. I have 2 now teenagers. I've done work for 6 years. I couldn't imagine bringing them every 2 weeks to these meetings, to be sitting in some room, in some school, around the district. They should be home trying to have their night routine. And so I would advocate more, we have this new found flexibility with being able to be remote, and so I would advocate more for supporting people to be able to participate from their own homes and how to support that, more so than I would driving children out in this cold, dark roads in our district. That's just my personal feeling. I know we've offered childcare at specific events, it's been very low attendance, so great abuse. Snacks and stuff, we could even bring our own snacks, to share. We've done that with other communities that I've been a part of, that during their time. That was sort of a low cost to the district for those of us who might not mind bringing share, but definitely I just have a little bit of a personal concern about children sort of being out of their homes, even if the meetings started at 5:30. If it was afternoon, if it was right after school, I would have no problem with it. We want to do like after school care. That's just my personal opinion on that side of it.
So we have a motion on the table, to increase the stipend to 1,500. Do we want to vote on that, or does someone, do you want to end that, what's the feeling of the group?
Too much.
And what's the second part of that?
And I would vote against that motion because it's too much. I mean, they can't be on any different ways.
We'll vote on it and then.
Or could we, if somebody wants to amend it, if you can make a motion to amend and pass, then we can vote on the original motion.
I mean, if you want to make an amendment, you can do that, or we can just vote on. Okay. Again, we'll discuss again. So we'll vote on 1,500. If it doesn't pass, we can make a motion before we say it passes. All right, so put the motion on the table. All those in favor, please say aye. And those opposed? Aye. Okay, so the motion does not pass. Does anybody want to raise a second motion? I know there's a motion. Okay, can I get a second for that motion? All right. Discussion, questions, about the motion on the table? And for clarity's sake, we vote on this and then it goes to the voters, correct? So this is not the end, it's not a done deal with Lindsay?
The amount, the other districts, the other local districts are 1,200. What's the right verbiage to ask to amend it to 1,200 so we're consistent with the other districts in our area? Hanford, Pearl Center, Sleep Valley, and Mount 8 are all 1,200. Make a motion to amend the motion.
But I will remind you that those are also small.
They are.
So just.
And we have for example, competition with Jennifer's 11. Okay.
Or we can vote on this motion, and if it doesn't pass, we can.
I'll make a motion to amend the motion on the table to the amount of $1,200 per each board member.
Yes. So we have a motion about the motion on the table. All those, is there a question or comment around this new motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of amending the motion on the table to raise the stipend to 1,200, please say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. And opposed? 3. Okay, so the motion passes to amend the motion on the table to raise the stipend to $1,200. So, are there any questions with the new motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of raising the board stipend to $1,200, please say aye. And any opposed? 3. So we have 5 for vote in favor of raising the stipend for the board to $1,200. Any abstentions? Good. All right. So moved. Thank you all for your discussion. Moving on to policy work.
Policy committee has added 2 new policies for the board to review. This is just the first reading. One is attendance, student attendance. The other is a new law, actually, that was put up with the state legislature in August, which is a policy on mascot and branding schools. Both of the policies that we're presenting are model VSBA policies. So when you read them, you'll see that it's basically Vermont State School Board's policies written. Under the class of attendance, it's sort of like class size, in that there is procedures that are specific to each building and each district. So sure, if you look at your student handbook, you'll find out the attendance procedures within each building. But the basic policy is the VSBA policy on attendance.
You have a policy now, has that changed?
The one that's in there now, we approved in 2017, so it's just a review and update. It was updated by VSBA, I think in sometime during this year, earlier this year, maybe February this year. So there's a slight, very slight, okay. It's usually just a word or two, like the added statutes in the other. Okay, that's not major change. Thank you.
Chrissy? How, with the student attendance, how are they defining present, was it how many hours per day must a student be there for it to be counted as a attendant? And I'm saying that the requirement, like at what point does the truancy kick in? That may be procedure, but maybe it should be in some way addressed in the policy. Like if somebody just comes for 1 hour, does that count, or if they just attend remotely?
Attend remotely, is it?
Well, that was just an example in this reading world of ours, you know. If you connect, but you can't see video and they don't say anything, does that count, you know?
Yeah, we actually did deal with that when our students were remote. We had to figure out what attendance meant. It was really challenging. Yeah, so we have procedures, and those were developed and with the other Madison County school districts because we revolve around the same truancy process, and we've gone through a couple iterations of that. We've gone through one recently too, where we're looking at that again. So I think in terms of the policy, all of that exists in the procedure, so it wouldn't make sense to bring that up into the policy. In which, you know, I think especially because this is a strong PSBA model policy too, that it makes sense to prove it as PSBA as updated.
Yes. I assume this is also coordinated with the Career Center? Yeah, okay.
No, this is just a review and then we'll vote on it.
All right, so at this moment, we are going to move into executive session for contract personnel. It's 7:41.
I will make the motion that we move to executive session. Should I please know?
Thank you.
Thank you.
They want to